Good evening, folks, and welcome to this week's episode of Beer Rating with Sean Connors. As you can see, the beer I have this week, Polygamy Nitro Porter. And I'm actually really looking forward to opening this one. Just the name, the graphics. The graphics, basically a half-naked guy with three half-naked women. So it kind of suits it, being the name is Polygamy. We're in our, just started our third week of self-isolation, social distancing, the whole works. I think everybody's getting a little bit down, and that's actually why I picked this name, because when I look at it, I just get a chuckle out of it. Polygamy Nitro Porter. A little bit about it. The brewery is out of Salt Lake City, Utah. Where else would a name like Polygamy? The brewery is Wasatch Brewery, W-A-S-A-T-C-H. My understanding that's a mountain range in the Utah, Salt Lake City area, so they get the name from that. The owner of the brewery is a gentleman by the name of Greg Schroff, S-C-H-I-R-F, so I'm probably not pronouncing it right. But he started in 1986, and he was actually the first brewery in Utah, that's my understanding, and then he went on to have the first brew pub in Utah. So the guy, he doesn't do anything the easy way, obviously, and, you know, just from the name, he's got a little bit of humor in him. He also had another beer, it was Evolution Amber Ale, so you know, you do what you got to do. So I'll read the can, see what they say. It's a nitro porter, so basically it's the gas in it is nitrogen rather than CO2 as per normal. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a while. It's 6% alcohol. It says Utah's first craft brewery, established in 1986. It says we drink our share and can the rest. And it says, she's on Nitro. Meet the sister wives of her classic brew, because they actually had a Polygamy Porter, and this is Polygamy Nitro Porter. This nitrogenated version is as chocolatey and easy drinking as the original, but even softer and creamier. It's okay to love both. And that's about it. What else can I say? As I said, 6%. Porters. A lot of times when you hear the name porter, it's porters and stouts, or actually a lot of times they're grouped together, and there's a reason for that. Basically, porter is what they call the mother of stout. So actually, porters came first. They were the real dark ale, and they were, back in the day, they were lower alcohol content, and then they started developing a porter that was actually higher alcohol content, and that became known as a stout porter. Basically means a strong porter. And then eventually, the stout porter was shortened to just stout, and that became more popular than porter. So there you go. But they've been the porters themselves. Like, I believe it was the first dark ale. At one point, it was pretty well probably the most popular beer in England at the time. I'm talking like 1700s. I think it was first mass produced in about 1820. The name comes from the fact that it was a working class beer that became really popular with the porters. And the porters were basically the guys that would go around carrying goods on their back from point A to point B. So it could be from the dock to the warehouse, the warehouse to the dock to the customer, whatever the case might be. So that the porter itself became popular with them, and that's where it got its name. Porters, like stouts, you're often going to get a chocolate or maybe a coffee, smoke, caramel, or nuts flavoring to them. Now I find personally, it seems like people either love porters and stouts or they hate them. That's most people. Myself, I'm somewhere in between. I have sometimes when I love a porter and stout, and other times it just doesn't do for me. One thing for me is I'm not a coffee drinker at all. Like, I have maybe 1 or 2 cups of coffee every 2 or 3 years. I'm not a big coffee drinker. So if I get a porter or a stout with a strong coffee flavor, for me that's normally a turn off. If it's chocolate, not so bad. I don't mind a little bit of coffee, but if it's overwhelming, it's not for me. And how the porters came about, nobody really knows. There's a couple of interesting stories. One story is a gentleman by the name of Ralph Horwood. And the story goes that basically, I'm talking like 1720s type of thing. The story goes that porters became popular. They were a thread or a blended beer. And what that means is basically you go to the pub or the establishment, whatever the case might be, and the bar master would actually take a little bit of beer from 3 or 4, maybe 5 different ones. They would blend them together. And the story goes that Ralph Horwood in 1722, he basically was the first person to produce them and deliver them to the bars or the pubs or the inns already blended. That's one story. A lot of people say no, that's not the proper story. Another one that says basically porters were basically a brown ale that was allowed to age, and some people say go stale. And basically at the time, once again, it was a blended beer or a threads, and the bartenders, what they would do, some of the threads were stronger, some were weaker, so they blend them to get exactly what they wanted or what they thought the patron would use. And what else can I say? A little bit about porters. They were actually popular in the States before lagers. Lagers, in the beer world, they were late coming to the world. I think it was in 1800. So prior to that, especially the lagers started in Germany, Czechoslovakia, that area of Europe. So before lagers actually got to America, the porter was the beer of choice. So much so that they say George Washington, that's how he drank a porter. Alright, so give my glass a quick cold water rinse as per usual. Once again, it's just to cool down the glass, get rid of any dust that might be there. And it's a nitrogenated beer, so I know it's going to be quite bubbly. Think of a Guinness. Guinness, they use nitrogen instead of CO2. So same idea. So I know it's going to be creamy, I know it's going to be bubbly, and being a porter, I know it's going to be dark. I'm actually surprised because I thought there would be a lot more head to it. This is interesting. Not much head whatsoever, and I expect a lot more. What I was expecting actually, let me give it a whiff. Nothing there jumping out at me. What was I expecting? If you've ever had a can of Guinness, there's what they call a widget in the can. And what it looks like, it's a small ball, a little bit smaller than a ping pong ball. It's got a little ball in it. And how it works is the widget is put in the can. Well, the widget is filled with nitrogen, put in the can. And when you open the can, the difference in pressure actually releases the nitrogen. That's what gives it the creamy head and whatnot. So I was expecting that in this, but they don't have the widget. So I'm assuming they just pump it in the can. There you go. Oh, I like that. Don't love it, but I like it. Like I said, I'm one of these, I'll have one stout or porter, I'll go, oh yeah, that's pretty good. And the next one, not so much. So I'm not, I love porters or I love stouts. I enjoy them, some, and not so much others. And it depends on what I'm in the mood for, like all beers. And what I like about this, there's nothing really strong. Like there's no strong coffee, there's no strong chocolate, there's no strong smoke. And the smoke, like I said, I don't like chocolate, but a few stouts and porters that I had with the smoke really turned me off, because to me it tasted like a dirty ashtray. So obviously that's a turn off. This one, I'm not getting anything in my face. Well, it's actually pretty good. My ratings, as per usual, out of 5, a 1 being don't like it, can't finish it, it's going down the drain. It's a drain pour. A 2 being, I'm not a big fan, but I'm not going to waste a beer, so I'll finish it. A 3 being a good beer, a 4 being a very good beer, and a 5 being the best beer I've ever had. So this one is definitely no lower than a 3, and no higher than a 4. I just got to figure out if it's a 3, is it 3.5, or is it 4? Doing a little bit of research on it, as I said, the owner of the brewery who started the brewery, gentleman Greg Schirf, S-C-H-I-R-F, he was quoted as saying, "Take some home for the wives." And I thought that was so cool. Polygamy, after all. Alright, give it a rating. I think I'm comfortable giving this one a 3.5. And for me, if you followed all my or any of my other ones, 3.5 is a pretty good rating for me. It means it's in between a good beer and a very good beer. And I would go so far as to say this is a strong 3.5. So it's actually a lot better. Like I said, I was looking forward to having this just because of the name, but I wasn't sure whether I'd like it or not, so I'm actually pleasantly surprised. So if you get the chance, if you see them around, pick up a few. Because, well, you know, it's Polygamy, so you can have more than just one. So you definitely got to pick up a few. Yeah, I think I'm going to stick with my 3.5. If I ever get down to Utah, I think I'll try to come across the regular, the classic Polygamy, where it's carbon dioxide instead of nitrogen. As I said, the one thing I'm surprised with this, I'm enjoying it, but the one thing I'm really surprised is being nitrogenated. I figured there'd be a lot more bubbles and a lot more head, kind of like what you get with a Guinness. You get the substantial head, the substantial bubbles. That's kind of what I was expecting. So I'm a little disappointed with that. But with that being said, the flavor and the taste are so good, and there's nothing there that's overwhelming. And that I like. So you go, folks. I think I'm going to stick with my 3.5 for my Polygamy Nitro Porter out of Utah, Salt Lake City, the Wasatch Brewery. There you go, folks. Hopefully you can join me next week. As always, be responsible. Until next beer, wash your hands. Cheers.